Thank you, sir.
That's fine. Just wanted to blow you up. Welcome to the Historic Association for today, our talk with George Thomas. Please go ahead and put your phones down to zap so that they won't disturb anybody. I was looking for a way to try and tie this introduction into George Thomas's talk today. And I found out that George Thomas has a blog. And this is something that someone wrote to George Thomas. George, here's a passage from your entry, Was It Gold? Dated 11 October 1819. Benjamin Thomas and his wife Rebecca of Anson sold to Jesse Bryant 200 acres, deed X85, Anson County. This land was situated on one side of Weatherford Branch, beginning at James Jenkins Corner to a rock by 3 red oaks in Pinion's Lane. And that's what a lot of history is just something that undescript. George had written in one of his, in something I read from George, he said, there's so much history that's left on decaying yellow legal pads. And I want to express how important everybody here today is to us. You have information of this area we don't have and we want. And another way you could be really helpful to us is to join the Historic Association so we can do more of what we do, like events for today. So I do want to thank you for being here. And Cindy Snow, our secretary, is going to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Welcome. Very happy to have you all here, especially considering the weather and the fact that we don't have First Sunday down here. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about George, our speaker. He's a North Carolina native, family historian, writer, he has a book, folks, and mapper seriously drawn to the importance of land records. He's an accomplished woodcarver, teacher, and he's been the director of the Craft Center at NC State. And if any of you guys don't know what the Craft Center at NC State, Google it. I did, and I didn't know it existed, and it's wonderful. He has always been quick to share his love of history and how it's provided a deep but quiet retreat to people who study it. About 2017, he experienced a game-changing experience upon learning of a Y DNA connection rooted in old Chatham County. That provided the impetus for his publication, Crossing Buckhorn. She has a copy of the book down there. I bought it, it's good. And the Untold Matters of Race and Family in the Evolved State of North Carolina. So he has a deep background, and he's going to share that with us today. Thank you very much for coming, George.
Thank you. And I'm going to start off by just giving a little, I lost my mom back in January. And since my mind has been just a little bit, so if I have just a little bit of trouble at some point in time, that's the cause. So, okay, I am George Thomas, and I go back in time, and a little bit about me, to a fellow by the name of Benjamin Thomas. And Benjamin Thomas first comes to Anson County in 1778. Okay, Anson County is down near Charlotte, and from him is a very, very large family that spreads from Charlotte, Shelby, down to all the way to the PD River. And so it's a large family. And it was way back, it was believed that we belonged to this Quaker family from Maryland. But where all those were like proper Quaker kind of names, we had these names like Ananias, Jacob, David, and Ezekiel, you know, which sort of, it made me think, well, this is Baptist, you know, this isn't Quaker, you know, and not by the first. And so I never bought into it. And we were able to make some changes, and, you know, we'll talk just a little bit about that. So it was believed that Benjamin was the son of Stephen from Maryland, and it turned out that that's not true. Through deeds and DNA, we disprove that. All right, but a little bit about Stephen. Stephen had sons that were like over the South Carolina military during the Revolutionary War. Okay, Tristram Thomas. He also had sons, John and Lewis, and who moved to Indiana. John moved to New Garden Meeting in Indiana, and strong Quaker. This is his son, Francis, who is known as the father of the Indiana Meeting. So that's a strong Quaker family. Very, very big family into the Underground Railroad. Stephen had a uncle named Lewis, and Lewis settled in a place called Lick Creek Meeting House in Orange County, Indiana. And so back in the 1990s, I thought, man, it would be cool to be related to these people, and wrote up there. And at that time, I didn't realize that, no, I wasn't related to these people. You know, I was having all this good time and good moment. It was all based on not so good stuff. So there in Orange County, you had Lick Creek Meeting House, and then just 9 minutes down the road, you know, back in the woods in the middle of, there was a settlement. And it's not the Roberts settlement. There's another place called the Roberts settlement, but this is the Thomas and the Roberts, and it's called Lick Creek African American Settlement. Formal. Okay, and I didn't know about it, and I rode back home, and 10 years went by, nothing. I was at a dead end because I had nobody beyond Benjamin, right? And then all of a sudden, well, and a little bit about, before I even get into that, the people that moved to Indiana, why did they do that? What happened? What drove that movement? First of all, in 1787, there was the ordinance for the territory in the northwest of the River Ohio. And that was the Northwest Territory. And in that act, that federal act, Article 6 says there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory. So that's something new in the country, right? And later on here in the South, laws changed, things got tighter, it grew very dim, dire, and there were people of color, enslaved, and then also free people of color. Free people of color could be mixed with white, they could be mixed with Native American, indigenous, black, any form of mixture. So we can't say it's all. Some people say that for Lick Creek settlement, Indiana, to be called an African American settlement may not be wholly true, because it is more. Okay, so this sort of led to things, and I'm not, you know, I don't want to really get down too deep into, but and very important was Elias Roberts from here in Chatham County in 1823. He went to the courthouse and received freedom papers. And on the bottom end of this, it says, in order to go to the state of Indiana. Okay, and then up at the top it says that he married the daughter of Ishmael Roberts, and she is the daughter of Thomas Archie. Okay, and it also says that both those men were Revolutionary War veterans. So here we are looking at a paper, 1823. This guy's wanting to leave the state, and yet his father and his, you know, they're Revolutionary War veterans. Great people. So, but it wasn't filed until 1833 when a lot of these papers were filed in Orange County, Indiana. And I would like to show you this video just so that, and if you drive through that area and if you look online, the things going on here aren't talked about. They're not well defined. They're not. And so, but up in Indiana, they've done archaeological digs of the settlement. There's written histories, and it's a very important part of the founding of Indiana. As a matter of fact, one of the first deeds in Orange County, Indiana, was from Elias's brother Benjamin, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So I would like, before we leave, I would like to somehow show you this, but we'll move on. Okay. I go back to Benjamin, and then for 10 years, I remember talking to James here at Archives, and he came up, "Are you kin to those Thomases in Moore County?" And I said, "No, I'm from Anson County," and had no idea. And it's like, then all of a sudden, this guy, he was a lieutenant colonel, had his DNA tested. He lived in Chicago, and it turned out that his father was a B-29 pilot from Moore County. And this family goes back to a guy by the name of Joseph Thomas, okay, that came to the area around 1770. And so there you see that DNA all of a sudden where things were, the brick wall was there was nothing. All of a sudden that brick wall fell and lots of new information came to fruition. Now, where did Joseph Thomas live? I call him Nuclear Joe. All right. This is Chatham County over there. You can see Wake County on the right. And that big block up in the top corner there, that's Sharon Harris Nuclear Plant. And really cool that today you see Thomas Branch. I wonder why. And then to the left, you see Tom Jack. My ancestor, Benjamin Thomas, I always thought he came from a guy by the name of Jacob Thomas from Wake. And I think that this is going to maybe not prove, but it indicates the time. Okay, if we look at this land here, let's see. And a lot of people, look at land and they just want it already done and in a neat package. It doesn't work that way. But if you look at the tree lines, those tree lines have been there for a long time. Okay, and if we look at this, there's Joseph Thomas's land grant from 1770s. And this is all around a place where bulldozers have been, preparing for a nuclear plant. So, I just think that's really cool. All right, the family around 1795, 1797. You can see where their land was. One is just right down in the corner, right below the nuclear plant. You can see the different tracks. But they went down the road that led to Brassville Ferry at that point in time and crossed over, and then they lived maybe 2 or 3 miles down the road. Okay, and much of this, what I'm about to talk about, is in that area. Okay, if you look at the map, you'll see the northern part is Chatham County, once Orange County. If you look at the lower part, that's Moore County, once Cumberland County, once Bladen County. You can find records of yourselves in all 3 jurisdictions. Okay, that line, what does that line recommend? What is that line? That is the Lord Granville line, the Granville district. He owned all the land from there to the Virginia state line. Okay, that's a lot of land. And all your Granville grants are based on that district. Okay, so this is, and the way I like to approach this is when I learn about somebody, I like to draw up the plat, where it occurred, and then start putting together the people, the neighbors, the friends, who they do business with. And then not only that, but deed it out in time so that you can see this layer of now, before, as much of that time column as possible. Now, if you look at this today, speaking of time columns, you think you can find, does anybody know where the Granville line is? Could you walk? Okay, I'm gonna show it to you. Can anybody see it? To me, it jumps out like a sore thumb. It's right here. That line going across. Okay, and so this is old Moore County, Chatham County, and now much of this is Lee County. Yeah, and See up at the top, you can see Avent Ferry Road coming down, and then Poplar Springs Church Road coming off to the side. This little piece of land, I'm gonna try to use this pointer. Right there is Memphis Methodist. Like an old church that they say goes back to the 1790s, excuse me. Now, for me, this is just family genealogy, just doing my thing, family history. I like calling it family history. But I found a deed, and this is 1804, and Joseph Thomas sold land to Ishmael Roberts. Okay, Ishmael Roberts was a free person of color, Revolutionary War soldier. But I'm just sitting here, I'm just this white guy, and I'm thinking, Joseph Thomas had sons. And why did he not sell that land to his sons? What was going on? What was, did they know each other? Was one person over the other? Was one like on Wizard of Oz, are you a good witch or a bad witch? What kind of person were you? And so as a neighbors, some of these people may have sold their land because it was swindled out of them, but then sometimes it appeared not. Money was good, and so what was the relationship between people as neighbors? And so I digitized all the tracts, and you can see here, Joseph Thomas's land was right here, important tract. He also had a piece of land here. He also has a piece of land here. He bought up this land, or the family did. This is John Shepherd. And then this land was, this land was Valentine Braswell, who moved to South Carolina. The land was later sold to Micaiah Thomas. Family history just sort of has him fading off into nothing, because they don't know what happened to him. It turns out that both of these two moved to Georgia, and then to where the military base is on the Chattahoochee River. And part of that family then descended in Joab Thomas, that was chancellor at NC State. He is from that family. And so his ancestry goes back to old Chatham County. There's another guy. I did my DNA, and this guy said, well, I'd like to talk to you that I'm related. And I called him, and he said, I can't talk to you right now. I'm busy. I'll get back with you later. And so like months later, and it turned out it was Henry Jackson Thomas Jr. Okay, does that name ring a bell? He played Elliot in the movie E.T. Okay, and so he's a Thomas, and we both go back to the same ancestry. And I think he comes from Chatham County. Okay, now, Ishmael Roberts has land that ties into all of this. And before he came to Chatham County, who was Ishmael Roberts? Okay, it turns out that he was in a lot of records in Robinson County. And here his land, it says he's got land beside Jacob Blunt, and then also a pew. Okay, and what does that tell me? On the Tuscarora site, it says that Tuscarora Chief William Billy Pugh bought land on the Saddle Tree Swamp. So that's probably that same family somehow. And also the Blunt family, the chief that was over the Indian Woods land reservation, he's also got land. So you can see that the migration, I always think of, the Melungians and, from that area as being just from that area, but you can see movement from the northeast, North Carolina. It's not, it's a little bit different from what I had thought. Ishmael Roberts was a Revolutionary War soldier. He was in the 10th Regiment under Abraham Shepherd. And here we're starting to look into Chatham County, and 1810. You can see the stars, and all those are people of color, free people of color. And there's Kenchin Roberts. Kenchin is the son of Ishmael Roberts, the Revolutionary War soldier. Okay. Ishmael is the son of a person by the name of Kenchin Roberts. That Kenchin Roberts also served in the Revolutionary War and died. That Kenchin Roberts received land in Tennessee for his payment of his services. But because he died, his heir and son, Ishmael, received his land in Tennessee, which was then assigned to somebody else. Okay, so, I mean, this is pretty cool stuff. William Dungeon. Okay. I'm not sure of this, but there's also a name called Dungy. And Abraham Lincoln, there's a famous case where this guy, and I don't remember his first name now, Dungy, was in a legal situation, and it was said that he was a black man. And he said, no, I'm mixed race, I'm people of color. And so there's a famous court case where Abraham Lincoln is representing him in this case. And it was out of, I think, Indiana and Tennessee, maybe Kentucky. Here's James Walden, okay, the son of John Chavis Walden. And that you see the Chavis family is also people of color. But John Chavis Walden first had land over against Randolph County on Brush Creek and had ties to Isaac Teague, and that land was sold. And when John Chavis Walden died, he gave land to sons, and all that land happens to be in this community. We don't know how he got that land. There's no deed for when John Chavis Walden received his land, but it later shows up in the hands of James. Here's Ishmael Roberts, the Revolutionary War soldier. And down here is Thomas Archie. Thomas Archie is the Elias's father-in-law. And then in the middle, you can see Allen Thomas, and he's going to be a son of Joseph Thomas. A little bit of detail, Thomas Archie, there's no deed surviving for this, but in the court minutes for Chatham County, it states that Thomas Archie deeded land to William Avent. William Avent is a Methodist preacher. Okay. And that Benjamin Roberts in Orange County in 1820 is listed in the census absolutely right beside Thomas Lindley. And so that's, that doesn't just happen. Somehow this Roberts family was down in the Cape Fear district, right down against Buckhorn Falls. And then part of this family was moving up to be closer to the Quakers. Okay. 1824, Benjamin Roberts is also mentioned in a new road order from Cane Creek Meeting House to the crossroads in Pine Hill. So that shows this action that he's working with in a different community. Okay. And then 1823, the Freedom Papers of Elias Roberts that weren't filed until 1833. And then finally, 1827, the last will and testament of Ishmael Roberts. Okay. And at that point, from that document, we start to get a better look at what's going on. Going back to the paper. Okay, if you see the pink plat there, okay, that was land first granted to Nicholas Partridge. He died 4 months later, and per his will. And then I don't know what happens to the land, but then in 1821, it goes to Kenton Roberts. Okay, and then Kenton Roberts sold it to Thomas Springfield. Okay, and in that deed, it was witnessed by the guy, William Campbell. That's important. Okay, and then Thomas Springfield sold it to Joseph Avent. Okay, and then then Glover Avent. And I wonder about that name Glover. Does that go back to Thomas Glover? John Chavis Walden's sister married Thomas Glover. And so are we seeing even, mixing within the Avent family?
I can see your reference about that.
Do you think so?
Glover.
Okay, all right. And then it went to A.M. Yarborough, who these people are buried, and there's a church there, and that is Memphis Methodist, that was believed to be formed around 1798. Now, about Memphis Methodist and about the Methodist Church, does everybody know the relationship between the Methodist Church and the Quakers during, say, 1800 time period? Everything is like given to the Quakers, that it was all just the Quakers. But in honesty, the Quakers were not allowed to own a slave. They could not buy a slave. Okay, it was forbidden. So they had to do a workaround. And so for a short period of time, they worked with the Methodists. The Methodists could own the slave, and then they would somehow, through some mechanism, the slave would be enslaved person would go to the Quakers, and then from there, that person would go to freedom somehow. It took a third element, and so you should not overlook that. Okay, this is Valentine Braswell's land. It then went to Phil Johnson, and then from him to Cage Thomas, McCage Thomas, who later moved to Georgia. McCage sold it to Ishmael Roberts. And then it's important, the estate. One thing that I missed saying about this tract. Notice that Kenton Roberts owned this tract from 1821 to 1828. The Methodist Church was built on this land. And so this Methodist Church was on land that was owned by a person of color for 7 years. You can't walk away from it. That's real. Okay, this is Joseph Thomas, and this is his first big land grant. And you can see 1798, he received the land, and in 1802, he deeded the large yellow tract, part of it, to Ishmael. And then the western half of that, he sold to his son Aaron in 1827. And then 1835, John Judd, the land had gone to John Judd, an important name, and it came to Gideon Dickens. Okay, Gideon Dickens is the father of a guy by the name of Anderson Dickens. Okay, does anybody know about Anderson Dickens? Great. Okay, the land to the west was James Raines' land, and then Allen Thomas sold it in 1818 to Ishmael Roberts. So lots of land. The people of color owned a sizable amount of land in Old Chatham County. Up in the top here, that large square, 640 acres. John Chapman sold it to Benjamin Spivey of Northampton. That happens to be the same place where the Roberts family came from. Okay. George G. the sheriff sold that same land to Abraham Harper. And then in 1820, John Chavis Walden sold the upper part to Henry Lawrence. The lower part was sold to Bartley Walden, his another son, and then later to Allen Thomas. So, you know, here it ties into the Thomas family, but then the pink up above that would be the Dungy land. And then there's also Jean family land, and there's other families. So you can see a large community mixed, you know, in that area. Jumped way past it. Okay, next. 1826, Ishmael Roberts wrote his last will and testament. Okay, and if you look at his signature here, and then if you compare it to his name up at the head, he wrote that will. Okay, so he was able to write. He provided education for his children. 1826, that's important. The co-executors were the Reverend William Avent, you know, the Methodist preacher from Memphis Church, and Sylvia Roberts, his wife. Looking back at this, you know, that tract, the Valentine Braswell land, eventually fell into the hands of Ishmael Roberts. Ishmael Roberts sold that little brown piece to a son who later sold it to somebody else. But when he died, the family deeded that land over to somebody else, sold it to somebody else. But that guy didn't get all his land because part of it had already been sold. And so he had paid for all of this land and not that one. So a court case came into being, right? And from that court case came this piece of paper. Okay, and in it, you can't hardly read it there, but it says William Avent, Isham Rosser, Micaiah Rosser, and Aaron Thomas. Aaron Thomas is the son of Joseph Thomas. Okay, and also Aaron Thomas is a brother-in-law of William Avent. Okay, so from this, what I really, really love, you can see from that old document the lay of the creek. And on your topographic map, you can see that same, you can like plop that down and you know exactly where he lived. That's 177 acres. And if you walked on that, 99% chance you're going to find the grave of Ishmael Roberts. Okay, and that would be huge. Looking at just the index for deeds, you can see how the members of the family sold their land to John W. Judd, and then on down lower, the rest of it to Aaron Thomas. Okay, so Aaron Thomas received the rest of it, and he received a large part of land in that area. A little bit about Aaron Thomas. He married, this is from the will of John Avent. He married Rebecca, the daughter of John Avent. A lot of people don't have that as such. And then also in 1821, there's a bond to operate the ferry. It says William Avent, owner, so he's a preacher, and he also owned the ferry. And the people who paid the bond, raised the bond to operate this ferry were his brother-in-laws, Aaron Thomas and Thomas Ragland. So these people were all family working together. And so I'm going to bet that Aaron Thomas was involved in the operation of the ferry. But Aaron and his wife, Rebecca, died 14 days or so apart in 1839. Okay, and from the fever. And I think 1841 was the year they said that it was a bad fever that went through the river community. We're going to go back to land. And if you go through the deed books, you can find the estate of Aaron Thomas. And so you can see how this tract here is the Valentine Braswell, and so he received the southern half of that land below the creek. So that was land once owned by Ishmael Roberts. So, you know, for me, it's really cool and bizarre that this land started off as Thomas land. It went into Ishmael, to others, and into Ishmael Roberts, into his children, and then into maybe others, but then it came back to Aaron Thomas. You know, and so that's, I don't know, to me, that doesn't show like dire enemy kind of people. That's more neighborly. If you look closely, John Ruffin Thomas on the end, on the left, he is Aaron's son. He served in the Civil War and died maybe in the war, maybe not. We don't know. Luther Thomas, okay, became famous for being poor, but he wasn't raised poor. He wasn't born poor. He had a lawsuit with William Crump and was for indebtedness. And then as a result of that, I think sort of cast the rest of his life in stone. Okay. And the next thing would be Joseph Thomas. Joseph Thomas was a keeper for the bridge, gatekeeper for the bridge over the Hall River. Okay. And Joseph Thomas was a Unionist. He did not believe in the Confederacy. And so this community, you know, if I go around and look, there's a mix of different, and HA, that's Hester Ann. She married a Harrington, and she's buried at Poplar Springs Church. And then the last one is Baxter Thomas. Baxter Thomas got poor, got rich, got poor kind of person. He had land dealings with William Boylan and his son John Hodge Boylan. William Boylan owned Southwest Raleigh. Okay, so he enslaved a person by the name of Elias, and Elias, there is a slave narrative from Elias Thomas that speaks about the relationships to the Boylan family. But there's a book, and you know, digitized everything now. It's just wonderful stuff. Because in this book, Common Whites, Class and Culture in Antebellum, North Carolina, by Bill Cecil Fronsman, wonderful book. Page 1, third line, it says basically that Luther Thomas was a really poor man and, you know, was a good example of the lowest class of people prior to the Civil War. And maybe, but it doesn't, you know, the whole book is on how people came to be that. In his situation, doesn't necessarily fit that bill. You know, so I take a little bit of exception, but it's cool how, you know, some days somebody will take exception with what I'm saying, and that's okay. Okay, at this point, this is Memphis Methodist, and you know, looking at that, I just want to take you on just a little short. I'm standing on the front porch of Memphis Methodist, and if I look to the right, looking south, I can say that was once Joseph Thomas's land. I'm looking right across Poplar Springs Road. Okay, and later that was deeded to Ishmael Roberts. Okay, and then later that was deeded to Gideon Dickens, and Gideon Dickens had a son by the name of Anderson Dickens. Okay. Anderson Dickens is an important person. Keep that name. So he grew up and played right beside the church. And the church was built on land that was once owned by Ishmael Roberts or Kitchen Roberts. Okay, if you look straight forward from that, you're looking right across the road, Avent Ferry Road, and you're looking at what was once Valentine Braswell's land and later Ishmael Roberts' land. Okay, and if you step out and you look to the southeast, there would have been an old road that connected with what's now called Lanier Road, and that road passed through the Roberts land, through the old Thomas land, through Aaron Thomas's land down to Moore County to Buckhorn Loop Road there. And 100 yards down is a church called Chestnut Zion AME. It's an African-American church. And that's the church today. Now, if you look at this church, the cornerstone says it was founded in 1865. Okay, yes. And it was founded on land donated by Anderson Dickens. So this young fellow that grew up right across the street from Memphis Methodist, something later drove him to give land for a church. Okay, and I think that's significant. Okay. At this point, it gets really, really dire, and I don't want to delve into that. There's family, as James pointed out, there's family that can like really, really tell you the stories of this. But if you don't know about it, it's important. Okay, what happened right after the Civil War, you know, and I'm not going to put blame on either side because I don't know, but African Americans, many of them were tired of what was slowness of what was going on and of the past and, you know, just everything. And so all throughout the state, they burned barns. Okay, and they would even have people to shoot as people came out to take care of the fire. I mean, it was just a very short period. Okay, and in Wake County, there was 6 to 10 barns were burned. Okay. It was said and believed that some of the planning for that occurred in this little church, and it was also served as a schoolhouse. Okay, so in the middle of the night, you can imagine people rode in, but at the same time, this was not all driven by the people of color. If you read the newspapers, early meetings through the governor of North Carolina with the people of color were discussing this. So it ran all the way up the ladder to the Republican Party at that time. So it's not all, you know, I would like to paint it good, you know, it's good, but it's not. This church then on a night, horsemen came in and Anderson Dickens and his wife were, you know, asleep, cold winter night. They took a fence post, rammed it through the door, took both of them, carried them out, made the wife go out and hunt brush to pile up in the church. And Anderson Dickens was asked to pile up the pews, and they burned the church. And then they were told never to talk about it again. Okay, it didn't stop there. There was just massive things against the community. And beside Anderson Dickens, maybe a mile down the road, lived this guy by the name of Henderson Judd, who happened to be the brother of John W. Judd, who sold the land that he had purchased from Ishmael Roberts to Aaron Thomas. Okay, Henderson Judd was the son of William Judd and Elizabeth. Henderson Judd raised a family with the lady that he had enslaved. And so at first, I guess they would be considered slaves before the end of the war. But then at the end, before his death, he was able to write out a will, and he acknowledges his love and care for his children and deeded all his land to the children. And so today, you know, there's a substantial amount of land, and there's a good striving community. So the Henderson Judd was, you know, he was carried out 5 miles away and he stripped of all his clothes in the middle of the winter, made to walk home, and he was later, they say in the family, this is their family lore, hung against a tree and castrated and let the bleed out. But before that happened, he was able to write his will and make amends. Okay, so horrible stuff. And you wonder, I go back, I was curious about land that my ancestral family sold to this person of color. And I was, well, what impact does that have on the future? What impact? How did it come to be? And so I think all of this is related, if not, connected through family, through community, business, love, and hatred. So it was a bad time, and of really bizarre interest is this guy. Does anybody know about Joseph G. Hester? I mean, he was a U.S. deputy marshal. And if you ever like to Google him up. Okay, he was a Confederate soldier. He was not a soldier, Navy. And he was on board a ship cruising the waters of Gibraltar. And he decided to kill his captain because he, something for some reason. Somehow he survived that. Okay, and then later on he had his own ship called the Pocahontas. Okay, he and his wife were going on their honeymoon to Barbados, and they happened to be going through the Charleston waters during a time of blockade. And so he was captured, run down and captured by another ship, Union ship. Okay. At that point in time, he says, well, I won't be a Confederate anymore. And took up the call of the Union, and he was appointed as a deputy U.S. Marshal right at the close of the war to handle the Klan and activities in North Carolina. And so he basically, all the events, all of that is written verbatim through the records of Congress. You can see it online. If you just Google up Henderson Judd, it's going to pop up. Like it's all online. And, but he discovered some Klan rooms. And there's also John Campbell, who was a leader in the area down there called Big Poplar of the Republican Party at that time. Okay, and John Campbell, I think, is going to be kin to all these Campbells that's witnessing all these the deeds and everything in that area, important deeds. So there's a connection. And he was captured, and they were going to hang him for his positions. But amongst those people was Joseph G. Hester, and who stopped it all, saved him. And in the end, the people standing in the back are not Klansmen. They are people of color dressed up in the robes, reenacting, and the guy on his knees is John Campbell. So, and this is from a document, I think, from East Carolina University. And so you can see this was from a photograph, and the photograph exists, and then an engraving went out, all over, so you can, lots of copies. And it's believed to be the first photograph of people dressed up in Klan robes. So we're sort of wrapping up here to the end. And you can see here that I go back to Benjamin Thomas. Through DNA, I connect to Joseph Thomas and then down to this story. But then how did Joseph become who he was, and how did the family become, and who am I? And so the family believes they go back to another Joseph Thomas who died in 1758, Bertie County. Bertie County, if you don't know about it, is an area where mixing has been normal since God created Earth. But if you go online and look at the little family history things, it's awful. It's just written out, no meat, no potatoes. It's just, it doesn't really tell you the story. All you need to do is look at the will. Okay? And what kind of person was he? I still don't know, but I can guess. If we'll go through this, down at the bottom, Nathaniel Kill and Joseph Kill. Nathaniel married Joseph's daughter Elizabeth, and they have had a son, Joseph, there, who is named for Joseph Thomas, right? The Kill family says that the Thomas family is indigenous. Okay, well, maybe we are. Maybe we're indigenous. Maybe I've got that rooted. Joseph Collins. Joseph Collins married Rachel Bunch, the daughter of Henry Bunch. That's a mulatto mixed race family. So here's Joseph Thomas, a legal witness whose wife is mixed race. This is 1752, 58. Arthur Williams. Okay, Arthur Williams is a very important man. He was a representative of Bertie County in the 1738. He and his brother both married through people of color, their wives, and yet they represented their county in the state conference. And there's Elizabeth, and there's Mary, and honestly, I think this ties into the Summerlin family. And the Summerlin, her brother-in-law married, or sister-in-law married into the Summerlin family, and the Summerlin family are tied into people of color. Josiah Thomas, this is an important one. Josiah Thomas married Sarah, there it goes, John Bazemore, Sarah Bazemore. Okay, the Bazemores are people of color. Okay, John Bazemore was a powerful man, but Josiah Thomas married his daughter Sarah. Michael Thomas, another brother, married a girl named Anna, last name unknown, but Anna, when Michael died, she married David Collins, the son of Joseph Collins. So his mother would have been Rachel Bunch, a person of color. And then here's Joseph Thomas that came to Wake County. I'm not sure that that's the same person. I'm going to be doing something later about that, but you know, the family history going way back says that he came, and when he came to Wake County, the last thing he did was sell his land to Joseph Collins, a person whose wife was a person of color. So my point here is that these people come to one place, and you think that they're just these individual peoples known by who we know them today, but they were somebody else earlier. And who were their community beforehand? Who were their neighbors? Who did they marry, call friend? Who did they hate? And all of that's important. Okay, and so for Joseph Thomas that came to Wake County, if it's the same person, then this kind of beginning maybe gives you a reason why he would befriend Ishmael Roberts, and why things in that area that where so many people move from Northeast North Carolina through this region, why things should not be seen just cut and dry. I'm white, I've always been white, because that's not the case. Okay. And just to sort of look back in time in the 1750s, you can see Free Mulatto, Henry Bunch. You can see John Bazemore, that's Josiah's father-in-law. Right there. I mean, they even owned slaves. Okay, the Levine family, the Wilson family, there's the Summerlin connection, Pritchard's, all these different families. This is a map from 1860s Confederate war map of the county. And it shows behind here E. Thomas, that's Everett Thomas. Everett is a known descendant of Josiah Thomas. Okay, Josiah Thomas, when he died in 1815, this is his estate land. And the house is right here.
It's still Eagonsbury.
Huh?
Is that still Eagonsbury?
Is that what now?
Still Eagonsbury area?
No, sir. No, sorry. This is Berkeley County. The Cassie River is right here. This is Chestnut Swamp off the Cassie River. Hope Plantation is about 4 or 5 miles down the road. And so Ishmael is a descendant, and you can see the land had fallen, was in the Bazemore hands there. And right here is J. Bunch. That's Jeremiah Bunch, the son of Henry Bunch. It was in that 1750s, and so these were people, this is community. You can just see it clear as a day going back to that time. And I planted out a little bit farther, and Joseph Thomas's land was just across the creek over. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've jumped to a whole different region. So that's basically it. And, if you have any questions or anything, I'd like to, really, it's like what you walk away with, and if your questions are answered, that kind of thing are important. But in conclusion, Chatham County has a very good history, rich, deep, wide. It covers, clicks all boxes. And you cannot take one box out or it won't be an accurate history. Secondly, look closely and read between the lines. Don't just say, well, Maddie got married to Joe and Joe's father, go beyond. Next thing, there's always something before and after. When I look at land, don't just find out where they live. Carry that forward 3 or 4 generations, carry it back 3 or 4 generations, look around both sides, community, and I think you will become aware of not just the person, but the times they lived. We are more than we may believe. And I still don't know, whether if I'm from a different Thomas line, if this turns out to be a rabbit hole for me, oh well. But the events that happened in Chatham County on the waters at Buckhorn Falls, right in that area, all of that was real, documented. And then at 10 generations back, okay, each one of us has 1,024 ancestors. 50 of those, 50% from our mothers. But that's a lot of chance for things that we don't know about. And from that 1,024, if you assume 10 per generation forward and take into consideration change in time, you're going to have about 1,900,000 cousins today. Okay, that's a lot of opportunity for things that you don't know and can't explain. So with that, I'm going to close, and you can find me on Amazon. I wrote this little book. This is the first time I've ever written anything, so it's deep in the tooth and sometimes, but I just wanted to put everything I could into it. And I'm working on another one for Stanley County, and it's about people that moved into that area. You can find it online at Amazon. You can reach me by email at Geothos. GEO is the Old English abbreviation for George, and THOS is the Old English abbreviation for Thomas at bellsouth.net. I also have a blog site, rockyrivernc.com. And you can find me anywhere people talk family and this kind of stuff. I love to get involved with that. Any questions?
So why did the people whose ancestors began in Tidewater, Virginia, I guess, move down to the North Carolina, Virginia line, Bertie County and so forth, and then come over to
What
Wayne?
happened?
Why did they keep moving? Why didn't they just stay where they were?
Well, okay, and you know, and all of that, and I've tried to go into that some in my book, that if you're in Virginia and you are an enslaved person or a free person of color, there's a time period, number one, that they said that anybody who is enslaved or free person of color, you have to be out of the state, period. And so they're gonna move. Where are they gonna move to? The area around the Dismal Swamp and up into that area was wilderness. The government was not fully in set. There was a little bit of Quaker influence up in there. And so this is a place where, and it's not just people of color. Your Baptists were involved in that too. And your, you know, so there's anybody that was downtrodden and also the Tuscarora were warring people, but some say that they had a feeling, an affinity for all that these other people had gone through. And so they mixed. And I mean, it goes on back even earlier. You might even think that first when Anglos came to this country, they needed to do business with the indigenous people. Well, it was to their benefit to wed and the indigenous females because they were the head of their matriarchal society. You know, so there's just this whole evolution of laws that came and it just got worse and worse and worse. But then the laws weren't consistently enforced. It was based on who was in power and then over time, because it's like these people who I showed in the 1750s that were listed as people of color, by 1790 came around, they're listed as white in census. So that whole definition changes. You know, so it's you know, as far, I think that if you go to Bertie County now, and when I first retired in 2017, I went to the 300th anniversary of Indian Woods. And it's there where I learned that the people there consider they have been just us kind of people all the way back to the beginning, intermixing and what we see today. I mean, they were in the Union during the Civil War. It's a lot different from the mindset that I had growing up in Western North Carolina. Anything else?
So you didn't bring any books to sign for us that we could buy?
You know what?
Autograph.
I got one here. But no, I'm new at this. You'll have to forgive me.
I'll go online again.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So you showed a will. And you showed all the children getting land and then getting firstborn of, I guess, an enslaved woman, Rosie, right? And then the next daughter or son got the second. How did that work?
Okay, now I'm not, wait, are you talking about Ishmael's estate?
You showed a will at towards the very end.
Right. Okay, well, the way they
And
were
then you
handling
said
it.
that one of the sons actually married an African-American woman. How was it that there were free African-American people and there were?
Well, okay, number one, okay, if you're talking about the 1750s will.
Yeah, well, I guess so.
Is that what you-
Final It was the one where you were
Okay,
highlighting.
about the land. And that's where it gets really difficult in that area because a lot of that land was Lord Granville grants going back to that early land. And what happened during the Revolutionary War, they didn't just keep all that land grants in the one location. They put a lot of that stuff in wagons and drove it around and kept it hid from the British troops, or else it would have just been burned and gone. But some of that is lost. And so for Bertie County, all that original record, much of it is gone. So you have to look at this and then you have to look at deeds and try to piece it back together. But as far as the marriage, the only penalty there would be a penalty for marrying a person of color. There was, but then was that enforced kind of thing? And then as far as the land, they knew what their land was. And they would cut marks on trees and different things like that. And so they could spread it out to the kids. Now, sometimes if it wasn't clearly laid out in a will, then you would have commissioners like in the state of Aaron Thomas, who died here in Chatham County. And Aaron's died of fever and didn't have time to, I guess, to write a will. And so commissioners were gathered and it was settled administered as an estate, not through will, not through probate. Yes.
So I know about the military boundary land. Do can you talk a little bit about if any of these were military boundary lands from the Revolutionary time?
Okay, military would be out center northern part of Tennessee. And there's a lot of that was then corrupted through government itself. But the Civil War, that land, if you were private, you would get, I think, 640 acres. If you were captain, you would get 3,500 acres kind of thing. And so the state had men, but we were still divided. We had some of us who were Tories, some that were Whigs. And you had to pay for raise this army. How did you do that? Only thing they had was this land beyond the mountains that we owned, but nobody, and it was to our benefit to get people out there. So we just said, well, if you serve as a private for 3 years, you will receive this land. And so Ishmael and his father are clearly documented. Others,
They got it? Do you think they actually got them?
okay, the documents that shows that the father got the land, but he died. And so then there's a thing that says assigned to Ishmael, heir, and his heir. Okay, and then later Ishmael's, that same piece of land, you can go through deeds in Tennessee, and you can find out that it was then heired to somebody else. Because a lot of people say, yeah, I got this land, but I don't want to go to Tennessee.
Where I was raised on the western part of Chatham County, there's a church that I attended. My grandmother take us there. The cemeteries are all Walden, Glover, and I even saw the name Chatham. And so when I saw this advertisement, it was like, whoa, I've got to go there because that's where my family lies. But what I wanted to ask is, without me having, is this all that we had? I noticed you only mentioned that family just a little. Do you have some kind of books or documents that I can
No,
research?